girl asked Reba McEntire for milk and promised to pay when she grew up. What she did impacted America. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Corner Market flickered overhead as 8-year-old Ashley Bennett clutched the crumpled dollar bills and handful of coins in her sweaty palm. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone in the small Nashville suburb grocery store could hear it. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her narrow shoulders like a heavy blanket she couldn't shake off. At home, 3 blocks away in their cramped apartment above Mrs. Patterson's garage, her mother Sarah lay burning with fever, delirious and calling out names Ashley didn't recognize. 2-year-old Tommy sat in his makeshift crib, crying for his evening bottle of warm milk, while 5-year-old Emma huddled in the corner, asking over and over when Mama would get better. Ashley had promised them both she would take care of everything, just like Daddy would have done if he hadn't died in that terrible car accident 18 months ago. The dairy aisle stretched before her like an impossible maze. Ashley had never bought groceries alone before, but desperation had pushed her small legs to walk those 3 blocks, dodging concerned neighbors who might ask too many questions and possibly call social services. She couldn't let them take Tommy and Emma away. She just couldn't. Standing before the refrigerated section, Ashley counted her money for the 4th time, hoping somehow the amount would magically increase. $3.67. The gallon of milk she needed cost $4.99. Her stomach dropped as reality crashed over her like a cold wave. If you've ever felt that crushing moment when you realize your best efforts aren't enough, you understand exactly what Ashley felt standing in that grocery store. Maybe you're watching this from your living room in Chicago, or perhaps you're listening from your car in Texas during your lunch break. Wherever you are, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where a stranger's kindness changed everything? Please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're joining us from today. Please, 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 Ashley whispered to herself, as if prayer could somehow make the coins multiply in her palm. She looked around the store, hoping maybe she could find something cheaper, but Tommy was lactose intolerant to everything except whole milk, and the pediatrician had been very specific about what he could digest. Behind the deli counter, Mrs. Rodriguez was slicing ham for an elderly man, who complained loudly about the thickness of each piece. Near the checkout, 2 teenagers laughed over something on one of their phones, completely oblivious to Ashley's growing panic. The world continued spinning while hers felt like it was falling apart. Ashley's eyes began to burn with unshed tears. How could she go home and tell Emma there would be no milk for Tommy tonight? How could she explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes being grown up meant making impossible choices? Emma still believed Ashley could fix anything, just like their daddy used to do. She remembered last week when Sarah had been working her 2nd job at the diner, and Ashley had successfully made mac and cheese for dinner, helped Emma with her homework, and gotten Tommy to sleep without any crying. Sarah had hugged her so tight that night and whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you, sweetheart. You're my little angel." But angels were supposed to perform miracles, weren't they? And right now, Ashley felt like the most powerless person in the entire world. The automatic doors at the front of the store whooshed open, letting in the warm Tennessee air, along with a woman who immediately caught Ashley's attention. She had striking red hair that seemed to glow under the harsh store lighting, and she moved with a confidence that Ashley envied. The woman wore simple jeans and a cotton blouse, but there was something about the way she carried herself that suggested she was used to being noticed. Ashley watched as the woman selected a cart and headed toward the produce section, greeting the cashier by name like she was a regular customer. For a moment, Ashley wondered what it would be like to walk into a store without counting every penny, to fill a cart without calculating the cost of each item. The woman eventually made her way toward the dairy section, and Ashley found herself studying her face. There was something familiar about her features, something that nagged at the back of Ashley's mind like a half-remembered dream. The woman selected several containers of yogurt, checking the expiration dates with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this countless times before. Ashley's desperation reached a breaking point as she realized she had been standing in the same spot for nearly 15 minutes. Tommy would be getting hungrier, and Emma would be getting more worried. Time was running out, and she still had no solution to her problem. Taking a deep breath that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs, Ashley approached the red-haired woman. Her legs felt like they were made of jelly, and her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Excuse me, Mum," Ashley managed to say, her small voice trembling with nervous energy. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if maybe you could help me with something." The woman turned toward Ashley, and suddenly the little girl's eyes widened in complete shock. The face looking down at her was one she had seen hundreds of times on the CD covers that lined their living room shelf. The same face that smiled from the poster taped to Emma's bedroom wall. The same face that appeared on the television screen whenever Mama played their favorite movies on Sunday afternoons. Standing before Ashley Bennett, holding a container of strawberry yogurt and looking genuinely curious about what this little girl might need, was Reba McEntire herself. The Reba McEntire, the woman whose voice had sung lullabies to Ashley and her siblings on countless difficult nights, whose songs Mama hummed while folding laundry or making breakfast on her days off from the hospital. Ashley's mouth fell open, and for several seconds, no words came out at all. Her heart, which had been pounding from anxiety, now raced with a mixture of terror and excitement that she had never experienced before. This couldn't be real. Famous people didn't shop at Murphy's Corner Market. Famous people didn't exist in the same world as little girls who couldn't afford milk. But there she was, looking exactly like the woman from the album covers, except more real somehow, more human. There were tiny lines around her eyes that spoke of years of smiling, and her red hair caught the fluorescent light in a way that seemed almost magical to Ashley's 8-year-old imagination. "What is it, sweetheart?" Reba asked, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that Ashley had heard in songs like "The Greatest Man I Never Knew" and "She Thinks His Name Was John." The voice that had comforted Ashley during the worst nights after Daddy died, when Mama cried herself to sleep and Ashley had to be strong for everyone. But Ashley still couldn't speak. She stood there frozen, clutching her inadequate money, staring up at this woman who existed somewhere between reality and dreams. Reba noticed the tears forming in the little girl's eyes and gently knelt down so they were at the same eye level. "Hey now, what's wrong? Are you lost? Do you need me to help you find your mama or daddy?" Reba's voice was soft and patient, the same tone Ashley had heard her use during interviews when she talked about her own children. The kindness in Reba's voice finally broke through Ashley's shock, and the words came tumbling out in a rush of desperate honesty. "I need to buy milk for my little brother Tommy, but I don't have enough money and Mama is really sick with fever, and Tommy won't sleep without his bottle, and I promised I would take care of everything, but I can't, and I don't know what to do." The words ran together like water breaking through a dam, and Ashley wiped her nose on her sleeve, suddenly aware of how she must look to this glamorous woman. Reba's expression softened even further, and Ashley could see something change in her eyes. It was like watching the sun emerge from behind clouds, a warmth that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside. "Well, honey, that sounds like quite a responsibility for someone your age," Reba said gently. "How old are you, sweetheart?" 8, Ashley whispered, suddenly feeling very small and very young. "But I'm the oldest, so I have to help. Daddy always said the oldest has to look out for everyone else." Something in Ashley's words seemed to hit Reba like a physical blow. Her hand moved unconsciously to her chest, and for just a moment her eyes took on a distant look, as if she was remembering something from long ago. "Your daddy sounds like he was a wise man," Reba said quietly. "What's your name, honey?" "Ashley Bennett, and you're Reba McEntire." The words came out like a statement of fact, as if Ashley was trying to convince herself this was really happening. Reba smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Well, Ashley Bennett, it's very nice to meet you. And you know what? I think we can figure out this milk situation together." But before Ashley could respond, a sharp voice cut through their conversation like a knife through warm butter. "Hey, little girl, are you bothering this customer?" The voice belonged to Derek Morrison, a 23-year-old assistant manager who had been working at Murphy's Corner Market for 6 months and took his minimal authority very seriously. Derek had noticed the conversation from across the store and assumed the worst, as he often did when it came to children he didn't recognize. Ashley's face flushed crimson with embarrassment. She took a step back from Reba, her small hands clutching the money even tighter. "I wasn't bothering anyone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Derek approached with the swagger of someone who believed his name tag gave him real power. He was tall and thin, with greasy hair that he constantly pushed back from his forehead, and he wore his store vest like it was a military uniform. "Look, kid, this is a place of business, not a playground. If you can't afford to shop here, maybe you should go somewhere else." The words hit Ashley like a physical slap. She had never been spoken to with such dismissiveness, such cruelty. Even during the worst days after her father's death, when bill collectors called and creditors sent threatening letters, nobody had ever made her feel so small and worthless. "I have money," Ashley said, her voice stronger now, fueled by indignation. She held up her crumpled bills and coins. "I just need to buy milk for my brother." Derek glanced at the money in Ashley's hand and let out a condescending laugh. "That's maybe $4, kid. Milk costs $5. This isn't a charity." He looked at Reba, apparently not recognizing her, and added, "I'm sorry this little beggar is bothering you, Mom. I'll take care of it." The word beggar hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Ashley felt her world crumble around her. The tears she had been fighting finally broke free, rolling down her cheeks in hot streams. She wasn't a beggar. She was a little girl trying to take care of her family, trying to be responsible, trying to fill shoes that were far too big for her small feet. Reba watched this exchange with growing anger, but it was a controlled anger, the kind that comes from years of dealing with difficult people in the music industry. She had encountered plenty of Derek Morrisons in her 4 decades of performing, people who wielded small amounts of power like weapons, people who seemed to take pleasure in making others feel inferior. But this was different. This wasn't some record executive trying to push her around, or a venue manager being difficult about contract terms. This was a grown man being cruel to a child who was already struggling with more responsibility than any 8-year-old should have to bear. "Excuse me," Reba said, her voice carrying a steel edge that Ashley had never heard in any of her songs, "but I don't think this little girl is bothering anyone." Derek turned his attention to Reba, still not recognizing her, and his expression softened only slightly. "Look, ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but we get kids in here all the time trying to scam customers. They come up with sob stories about sick relatives and try to get people to give them money. It's a common trick." Ashley's tears came harder now. "It's not a trick," she sobbed. "My mama really is sick, and Tommy really needs his milk, and I really do have some money, just not enough." Her voice broke on the last words, and she covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed by shame and frustration. Reba felt something twist in her chest as she watched this little girl fall apart. It was the same feeling she had experienced earlier that day in the conference room with her record label, when the executives had essentially told her that her authentic country sound wasn't marketable anymore, that she needed to change who she was to stay relevant. They had used different words, of course. They talked about expanding her demographic reach and modernizing her sound for contemporary audiences, but what they really meant was that Reba McEntire, the girl from Chalky, Oklahoma, who had grown up on a cattle ranch and learned to sing by listening to her grandmother's records, wasn't good enough anymore. Just like Derek was telling Ashley she wasn't good enough now. The parallel hit Reba like a lightning bolt. Here was this precious child, trying her best to take care of her family, being told by some small-minded person in a position of minor authority that she didn't measure up. It was exactly what had happened to Reba just hours earlier, except Ashley's situation was real and immediate and heartbreaking. "What's your name?" Reba asked Derek, her voice deceptively calm. "Derek Morrison, assistant manager," he replied, puffing out his chest slightly. "And like I said, Mom, I can handle this situation. You don't need to worry about it." Reba nodded slowly as if she was considering his words. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. "Derek Morrison, assistant manager, let me ask you something. When you were 8 years old, did anyone ever make you feel like you weren't worth helping?" Derek's confident expression faltered slightly. "I don't see what that has to do with anything." "It has everything to do with everything," Reba replied, her voice growing stronger. "This little girl isn't trying to scam anyone. She's trying to buy milk for her baby brother because her mother is sick. She came in here with every penny she could find, and instead of finding help, she found judgment." She knelt down next to Ashley and gently touched her shoulder. "Sweetheart, look at me." Ashley lifted her tear-streaked face, and Reba's heart broke a little more. In those eyes she saw her own childhood, her own struggles, her own determination to take care of the people she loved, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. "I want you to know something very important," Reba said, speaking directly to Ashley, but making sure her voice was loud enough for Derek to hear every word. "You are not a beggar. You are not bothering anyone. You are a brave little girl who loves her family so much that you walked to this store by yourself to make sure your brother had what he needed. That makes you a hero, not a beggar." Derek shifted uncomfortably, perhaps beginning to realize that this wasn't going the way he had expected. Other customers had started to notice the commotion, and several people had stopped their shopping to watch what was unfolding in the dairy aisle. "Now, Derek Morrison, assistant manager," Reba continued, standing up to face him directly, "let me tell you who I am. My name is Reba McEntire, and I've been shopping in small-town grocery stores my entire life. I've met thousands of store employees, and most of them understand that treating customers, especially children, with respect and kindness is not just good business, it's basic human decency." Derek's eyes widened as recognition finally dawned. His face went through several shades of red before settling on a pale, sickly color. Oh no, I didn't know. You didn't know who I was, so you thought it was okay to be cruel to a child." Reba's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded audiences of thousands, someone who had earned respect through decades of hard work and genuine care for her fans. "Derek, let me share something with you that my mama taught me when I was probably about Ashley's age." Reba paused, looking around at the small crowd that had gathered. She could see Mrs. Rodriguez from the deli counter, the elderly man who had been complaining about his ham, the two teenagers who had stopped scrolling through their phones, and several other customers who had been drawn by the commotion. This wasn't how she had planned to spend her evening, but sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be. "My mama, Jacqueline McEntire, used to tell me that you can judge a person's true character, not by how they treat people who can do something for them, but by how they treat people who can't do anything for them at all." Reba's voice carried across the store, clear and strong. "Ashley here can't do anything for you, Derek. She's 8 years old, she can't get you promoted, she can't give you a raise, she can't make your life easier in any way. So the way you treat her shows me exactly who you are." Derek's face had gone from red to white, to a greenish shade that suggested he might be sick. He glanced around at the watching faces, realizing that his behavior was now on display for everyone to see. "Ms. McEntire, I was just doing my job. We have policies about treating children with cruelty," Reba interrupted. "About making little girls cry when they're already doing their best. Those are interesting policies, Derek." Ashley had stopped crying and was watching this exchange with wide eyes. She had never seen a grown-up stand up for her like this, not since her father died. Even her mother, as much as Ashley loved her, was usually too tired or too stressed to fight battles that weren't absolutely necessary. But here was Reba McEntire herself, using her voice not to sing a song, but to defend a little girl she had just met. "Let me tell you about when I was growing up in Oklahoma," Reba continued, her voice taking on the storytelling cadence that had made her famous. "We didn't have much money. My daddy was a champion steer roper, but that doesn't pay the bills like people think it does. My mama worked multiple jobs to keep us fed and clothed. There were plenty of times when we kids had to go to the store with not quite enough money for what we needed." She reached down and took Ashley's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I remember one time when I was about 9 years old. My mama was in the hospital having my little brother, and I had to go to the general store to buy formula for the baby. I counted my money 3 times, just like Ashley did today, and I was short about 50 cents. Derek was shifting from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable, but unable to walk away from what had become a very public situation. "The store owner was a man named Mr. Henderson," Reba continued. "He could have done what you did, Derek. He could have told me to come back when I had enough money. He could have made me feel small and worthless. Instead, he looked at me and said, 'Reba, honey, looks like you're working awful hard to take care of your family. How about you sweep my front porch for me and we'll call it even?'" Ashley's eyes were fixed on Reba's face, hanging on every word. The idea that this famous, successful woman had once been in almost the exact same situation was both comforting and incredible. "So, I swept that porch," Reba said, her voice growing warmer with the memory. "And Mr. Henderson gave me that formula, plus a little bag of penny candy for my other brothers and sisters. But more than that, he gave me something much more valuable. He gave me dignity. He made me feel like I was worth helping, like my efforts mattered, like I was a valuable person even though I was just a kid with not quite enough money." She turned her full attention back to Derek, and her voice took on a sharper edge. "What you gave Ashley today was the opposite of dignity. You gave her shame, you made her feel worthless. And for what? To show off your little bit of authority, to feel important in front of a customer you didn't even recognize?" Several people in the growing crowd were nodding, and Ashley could hear someone say, "That's right," under their breath. Mrs. Rodriguez had crossed herself and was shaking her head at Derek's behavior. "I became who I am today partly because of people like Mr. Henderson," Reba continued. People who saw a struggling kid and chose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment. But I've also met plenty of people like you, Derek. People who use their tiny bit of power to make others feel small. And you know what? Those people don't get very far in life because eventually everyone figures out who they really are. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Ms. McEntire, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just... You were just what? Reba asked. Just doing your job. Because if treating children badly is part of your job description, then maybe you need to think about whether this is the right job for you. Ashley watched this exchange with growing amazement. Not only was Reba McEntire defending her, but she was doing it in a way that made Ashley feel strong instead of weak, important instead of insignificant. This was what having someone in your corner felt like. This was what it meant to have someone believe you were worth fighting for. Now, Reba said, her voice becoming businesslike, here's what's going to happen. Ashley came in here to buy milk for her little brother. She has $3.67, and she needs a gallon of milk that costs $4.99. I'm going to make up the difference, and you're going to ring it up with a smile and treat this young lady with the respect she deserves. She reached into her wallet and pulled out a $5 bill, handing it to Ashley. There you go, sweetheart. Now you have enough for the milk and a little extra besides. But Ashley didn't take the money right away. Instead, she looked up at Reba with an expression that was part gratitude, part confusion, and part something that looked almost like recognition. Why are you helping me? Ashley asked quietly. You don't even know me. The question hit Reba in a place she hadn't expected. It was such a simple question, but it contained so much. Why was she helping? Because Ashley reminded her of herself, because she was angry at Derek, because she was still reeling from her own difficult day with the record executives. All of those things were true, but there was something deeper, something that connected to the very reason she had started making music in the first place. I'm helping you, Ashley, because someone helped me once when I needed it, Reba said simply. And because when we see someone struggling, especially someone as brave as you are, we have a choice. We can walk away and pretend it's not our problem, or we can step up and do what we can to help. I've been blessed in my life, and part of being blessed is sharing those blessings with others. She knelt down again, bringing herself to Ashley's eye level. But more than that, sweetheart, I'm helping you because you remind me of something I almost forgot today. You remind me that there are still people in this world who care more about taking care of their family than they do about themselves. That's something special, Ashley. That's something worth protecting. Ashley's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears. These weren't tears of shame or frustration or fear. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of feeling seen and valued by someone who didn't have to care but chose to anyway. Thank you, Ashley whispered, and the words carried more weight than any thank you Reba had ever received from any audience, any awards show, any review in any magazine. Derek cleared his throat nervously. Should I ring up the milk now? Reba stood up and fixed him with a steady gaze. Yes, Derek, you should. And while you're doing that, I want you to think about what kind of person you want to be. Because every day, we get to choose. We can choose to be someone who builds people up, or someone who tears them down. Today you chose to tear down an 8-year-old girl who was already carrying more weight than she should have to. I hope next time you'll make a different choice. As they walked toward the checkout counter, Ashley clutching her money and the milk, she looked up at Reba with wonder. Are you really Reba McEntire? Like the real one? Reba laughed, and it was a sound like music itself. I'm really me, honey. Though after the day I've had, I'm not entirely sure what that means anymore. Ashley considered this seriously, as only children can. Mama says you sing about strong women who don't give up even when things get hard. I think that means you're someone who helps people like me. The simplicity and truth of Ashley's words hit Reba like a revelation. Here was this 8-year-old girl, defining her identity more clearly than any record executive ever had. She didn't sing about strong women, she was a strong woman. And strong women helped each other, especially when one of them was small and scared and trying to take care of her family with $3.67. At the checkout counter, Derek rang up the milk with shaking hands. His earlier arrogance completely deflated. He mumbled an apology to Ashley that sounded genuine, if embarrassed. Several customers in line smiled at Ashley and Reba, and Mrs. Rodriguez called out in accented English, "You take care of your mama, mija. She's lucky to have you." As they walked toward the exit, Reba found herself not wanting this encounter to end. There was something about Ashley that had awakened feelings she hadn't experienced in years, feelings of purpose that went beyond album sales and concert tickets, feelings of connection that transcended the artificial boundaries between performer and audience. "Ashley," Reba said as they paused outside the store, "would it be okay if I walked home with you? I'd like to meet your mama and make sure she's all right." Ashley's eyes widened. "You want to come to my house? But it's not fancy or anything. We live above Mrs. Patterson's garage and there's water stains on the ceiling, and sometimes the heat doesn't work very good." "Honey," Reba said gently, "I grew up in a house where we had to put buckets out when it rained because the roof leaked. Fancy doesn't matter to me, people matter." The 3-block walk to Ashley's home revealed more about the little girl's character than Reba could have imagined. Ashley pointed out the houses where friendly neighbors lived, waved to an elderly man watering his garden, and stopped to pet a stray cat that clearly knew her well. "That's Mr. Winston," Ashley explained as the old man waved back. "When Mama was in the hospital after Daddy died, he brought us soup every day for 2 weeks. And this is Patches," she added, scratching the orange tabby behind the ears. "She doesn't have a home, so I share my lunch with her sometimes." Even in her own struggle, Ashley was taking care of others. Reba felt her heart swell with admiration for this remarkable child, who seemed to understand instinctively what many adults never learned, that kindness was a choice, and it was always the right choice. When they reached the small apartment above the garage, Ashley hesitated at the bottom of the narrow wooden stairs. "Maybe I should go up first and check on Mama. Sometimes when she has fever, she gets confused and might be scared if a stranger comes in." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll wait right here." Ashley climbed the stairs carefully, balancing the milk jug against her small body. Reba could hear her gentle voice through the thin walls, talking to someone inside. After a few minutes, Ashley appeared at the top of the stairs. "Mama's awake and Emma told her about you. She can't believe it's really you, but she said to please come up if you want to." The apartment was exactly what Reba had expected: small, clean despite its obvious age, and filled with love. Sarah Bennett lay on a narrow couch, clearly weak from fever, but trying to sit up. She was a pretty woman in her early 30s, with Ashley's same dark hair and kind eyes. Despite her illness, she had attempted to smooth her hair and make herself presentable. "Ms. McEntire," Sarah said, her voice hoarse but filled with amazement, "I can't believe you're here. Ashley told me what happened at the store, but I thought maybe the fever was making her imagine things." Emma, a delicate 5-year-old with pigtails, peeked out from behind the couch, staring at Reba with undisguised awe. In a corner makeshift crib, 2-year-old Tommy sat up, his eyes bright with fever but curious about the visitor. "Please call me Reba," she said, settling into a worn armchair across from the couch. "And don't you worry about getting up. I just wanted to make sure you were okay and see if there was anything else I could do to help." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You've already done so much. Ashley told me how you stood up for her, how you made her feel important. You have no idea what that means to us." As if on cue, Tommy began to fuss, reaching his small arms toward Ashley. She immediately went to him, picking him up with the practiced ease of someone who had been caring for babies since she was barely more than a baby herself. "He's hungry," Ashley explained to Reba. "I'll make his bottle now." Watching Ashley navigate the tiny kitchen, warming the milk to just the right temperature, testing it on her wrist the way her mother had taught her, Reba felt a profound sadness mixed with admiration. This little girl was living a life that required her to be an adult while still being a child herself. "How long have you been sick, Sarah?" Reba asked gently. 3 days, Sarah replied, accepting a cool washcloth that Emma brought her without being asked. "I work as a nurse at Nashville General, and there's been a flu going around. I tried to keep working, but yesterday I collapsed during my shift. They sent me home and told me not to come back until my fever breaks. And the children have been taking care of themselves." Sarah's voice broke slightly. "Ashley has been taking care of all of us. She's been more responsible than most adults I know, but she shouldn't have to be. She should be playing with dolls and watching cartoons, not worrying about whether there's enough money for milk." Reba watched as Ashley successfully got Tommy to take his bottle, his small hands patting at her face as he drank. Emma had climbed onto the couch next to her mother, and the family picture they made was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "Sarah, can I ask you something personal?" Reba said. "What happened to your husband?" Sarah's face clouded with pain that was still fresh even after 18 months. "Car accident. He was coming home from his second job. He worked construction during the day and stocked shelves at night to help make ends meet. It was raining and a drunk driver ran a red light. She paused, gathering strength. James was a good man. He worked so hard to take care of us. Ashley adored him. She still talks to his picture every night before bed. Emma spoke up in a small voice. Daddy used to sing with Ashley when she was scared. Now Ashley sings to Tommy when he cries. What do you sing to him, Ashley? Reba asked. Ashley looked embarrassed. Just songs Mama likes. Sometimes I sing Consider Me Gone because it has a pretty melody, but I change the words to be about going to sleep instead. Reba's breath caught in her throat. You sing my songs? Mama plays your music all the time, Emma said proudly. She says you sing about ladies who are strong even when things are hard. Ashley is strong like that too. We listen to Is There Life Out There at least once a week, Sarah added with a weak smile. It reminds me that even though things are difficult now, there's still hope for something better. That song got me through some very dark nights after James died. Reba felt tears pricking at her eyes. This was why she made music. Not for the executives who wanted her to change her sound, not for the critics who thought country music was outdated, but for families like this one. For women like Sarah who needed to hear that they weren't alone in their struggles. For little girls like Ashley who were learning that strength came not from never falling down, but from getting back up every time you did. Ashley, Reba said, would you come sit with me for a minute? Ashley handed Tommy to Emma and settled cross-legged on the floor beside Reba's chair, looking up at her with those serious dark eyes. I want to tell you something very important, Reba began. Today, when I met you in that store, I was having one of the worst days I've had in a long time. Some people at my record company were trying to tell me that I needed to change who I am, that the kind of music I make isn't good enough anymore. Ashley frowned. But your music is the best music. It makes Mama feel better when she's sad. Thank you, sweetheart. But sometimes when people keep telling you that you're not good enough, you start to believe them. I was starting to forget why I became a singer in the first place. She reached down and gently touched Ashley's hand. But then I met you. I met a little girl who was being told she wasn't good enough by someone who didn't know anything about her real worth. And when I saw how wrong that was, it reminded me that maybe those people at my record company were wrong about me, too. Sarah was listening intently, her eyes bright despite her fever. I became a singer because I wanted to tell stories about real people facing real problems, Reba continued. I wanted to sing for people like your mama, who work 2 jobs and never give up. I wanted to sing for people like you, Ashley, who take care of others even when they're just kids themselves. Today, you reminded me that those are the people who matter. Those are the stories worth telling. Ashley considered this seriously. So helping me helped you too? It did, honey. It really did. Tommy had finished his bottle and was beginning to drowse against Emma's chest. The apartment felt peaceful now, filled with the kind of contentment that comes after a crisis has been weathered. Reba, Sarah said softly, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done today. Not just the milk, but making Ashley feel valued, showing her that there are adults in this world who will stand up for children. Her father used to do that. You've given her something precious. Reba stood up, but instead of heading toward the door, she walked to the small window that looked out over the neighborhood. Lights were coming on in houses where families were gathering for dinner, where parents were helping children with homework, where the ordinary magic of daily life was unfolding. Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. Okay, what would help your family the most right now? Not just today, but in the long term. What would make the biggest difference in your lives? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Honestly, I've been trying to go back to school to get my nursing degree. Right now, I'm just a licensed practical nurse. But if I could become a registered nurse, it would mean better hours, better pay, more stability for the kids. But I can't afford the tuition, and I can't figure out how to manage school and work and taking care of 3 children. Reba turned back to face the family, and there was something in her expression that made the air in the room feel charged with possibility. Sarah, what if I told you that I know some people who might be able to help with that nursing degree? What if there was a way to make your dream happen without you having to choose between school and taking care of your children? Sarah sat up straighter, ignoring the dizziness that came with her fever. I would say that sounds too good to be true. Sometimes, Reba said with a smile that reminded Ashley of sunshine breaking through storm clouds, The best things in life sound too good to be true until they happen. Over the next hour, Reba made several phone calls. She spoke to people at Vanderbilt University's nursing program, to financial aid counselors, and to her own business manager about scholarship opportunities. Ashley watched in amazement as this famous woman used her influence not for herself, but for them. "There's a scholarship program for single mothers pursuing nursing degrees," Reba explained after her final call. "It covers tuition and provides a monthly stipend for living expenses. The application deadline was last month, but I spoke to the program director, and they're willing to make an exception for a special case." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "You mean they would consider me?" "They would more than consider you, honey. With your work experience and your situation, you're exactly the kind of person this program was designed to help." As the evening wore on, practical arrangements were discussed and plans were made. Reba's assistant would help Sarah with the application process. A local daycare that Reba supported would provide childcare assistance. Most importantly, Ashley would be able to be a child again instead of carrying the weight of adult responsibilities. "I don't understand why you're doing all this for us," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "We're strangers to you." Reba looked at Ashley, who was curled up on the floor with Emma, both girls listening to every word with wide eyes. "You know, Sarah, I've spent 40 years in this business and I've won awards and sold millions of records and performed for presidents and royalty. But none of that ever made me feel as good as I feel right now, sitting in this little apartment with your family." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "This morning, some executives tried to tell me that my music doesn't matter anymore, that the stories I tell aren't relevant to today's world. Tonight, sitting here with you and Ashley and Emma and Tommy, I know they were wrong. The stories that matter most are the ones about real people facing real challenges with courage and love. Your story matters. Ashley's story matters." 2 weeks later, Sarah's fever had broken and she was back on her feet. The scholarship application had been submitted and accepted with remarkable speed. More importantly, the whole family seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden they hadn't even realized they were carrying had been lifted from their shoulders. Ashley had returned to being an 8-year-old girl. She played with dolls, watched cartoons, and giggled with Emma over silly jokes. But she still helped with Tommy, still did her chores, still showed the same remarkable character that had impressed Reba that day in the grocery store. The real surprise came when Reba invited the family to attend one of her concerts at the Grand Ole Opry. They sat in a special box, and when Reba introduced them to the audience as some very special friends, Ashley felt like she might burst with pride. But the most magical moment came when Reba dedicated "Is There Life Out There" to all the strong women who never give up, especially the mothers who work 2 jobs and the 8-year-old girls who take care of their families with $3.67. The years that followed brought remarkable changes to the Bennett family. Sarah completed her nursing degree with honors and found a position at a pediatric hospital that allowed her to work day shifts and be home with her children in the evenings. Emma flourished in school and discovered a talent for mathematics. Tommy grew into a healthy, happy little boy who called Reba Aunt Reba and sang along to her songs with enthusiastic, if not entirely accurate, lyrics. And Ashley, sweet Ashley, grew into a remarkable young woman who never forgot the lesson she learned that day in Murphy's Corner Market about the power of kindness and the importance of standing up for others. She excelled in school, particularly in music and English literature. She wrote essays about courage and compassion that made her teachers weep. She volunteered at the local food bank and always had time to help younger children who were struggling. But most importantly, she never lost the quality that had first attracted Reba to her, that genuine care for others that seemed to shine from within. When Ashley turned 18 and graduated from high school as valedictorian, Reba was there in the audience, beaming with pride. When Ashley received a full scholarship to study music therapy at Belmont University, Reba was the first person she called. "I want to help children the way you helped me," Ashley told her over the phone. "I want to use music to heal people, to make them feel less alone." "You're already doing that, sweetheart," Reba replied. "You've been doing that since you were 8 years old." But the most extraordinary moment came during Ashley's sophomore year in college. Reba was organizing a benefit concert for children's charities, and she asked Ashley if she would like to perform. "I wrote a song," Ashley said nervously. "It's about that day we met. Would it be okay if I sang it?" The night of the concert, Ashley stood on the same Grand Ole Opry stage where she had once sat in the audience as a little girl. She was 20 years old now, poised and confident, but when she looked out at the audience and saw Reba watching from the wings, she felt like that 8-year-old girl again. "This song is called $3.67, Ashley announced. "It's about a day when I learned that sometimes the most important moments in our lives start with the smallest gestures." As she began to sing, her clear, strong voice filling the historic venue, Ashley told the story of a little girl who needed milk and a woman who chose kindness. She sang about dignity and respect, about the power of standing up for others, about how one person's compassion can change the course of an entire life. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. In the wings, Reba wiped tears from her eyes as she listened to Ashley transform that difficult day into something beautiful, something that could inspire others. The final verse of Ashley's song brought the story full circle. She knelt down beside me in that grocery store, said, "Honey, what is it you're crying for? I needed milk for my baby brother. She gave me so much more than money. She gave me a mother's love." Now, 10 years later, I finally see the gift she gave was believing in me. $3.67 couldn't buy the lesson that kindness will never die. When Ashley finished singing, the silence stretched for several heartbeats before the audience erupted in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Reba walked out onto the stage and embraced Ashley, both women crying openly. "You did it, sweetheart," Reba whispered. "You paid it forward." As they stood together on that stage, Ashley realized that the debt she had imagined she owed Reba had never really existed. What had happened between them wasn't a transaction, it was a gift that was meant to be shared, a lesson about compassion that was meant to be passed on to others. The little girl who had once counted coins in a grocery store had grown into a young woman who understood that the most valuable currency in the world wasn't money, it was kindness. And kindness, once given freely, had a way of multiplying and spreading and changing the world one person at a time. In the audience that night sat dozens of people whose lives had been touched by Ashley's volunteer work, by her music, by her simple determination to treat everyone with dignity and respect. Among them were Sarah, Emma, and Tommy, who had all thrived in ways that once seemed impossible. But perhaps most importantly, in the front row sat a new generation of children from the local community center, where Ashley volunteered. Children who were learning that their voices mattered, that their stories were worth telling, that kindness was always the right choice. As the applause finally died down and Ashley took her final bow, she caught sight of a little girl in the front row who reminded her of herself at 8 years old, wide-eyed, determined, carrying responsibilities too heavy for such small shoulders. Ashley made a mental note to introduce herself after the show, to let that little girl know that someone saw her, someone believed in her, someone was ready to help. The circle of kindness that had started with $3.67 in a small grocery store would continue to grow, touching lives in ways that neither Reba nor Ashley could have imagined that first day they met. Because sometimes the most ordinary moments become extraordinary when they're touched by love, by compassion, by the simple human decision to care about someone else's story. And that, Ashley knew as she waved to the cheering crowd, was the most beautiful song of all.